You?
I'm doing all right, I guess, so far.
Okay. Before we start, I just had the chance to speak to Sally. Oh, wait a minute. I'll have to mute my own stream. Okay. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. I just had a small chat with Sally. People might know her as the Ouroboros on Twitter. Sally has had another stroke and is in the hospital right now. So what I wanted to do first is send my love to Sally and hope she gets well soon.
Definitely,
Because
yeah.
we do miss her on Twitter. I didn't get all the info. It looks like she's going to be okay. So let's just hope for that. Okay. That was personal. I wanted to get that out so everybody knows why Sally's gone and what's going on. Our talk on evolution. It seems to be in the picture again, as Kent Hovind is trying to debate as much atheists as he can find. And we've discussed things on Twitter a bit, things we have good evidence for, and that aren't always addressed in these kind of debates. You being kind of a specialist in the area, maybe you can shed a light on a few things. So I know you've prepared a few things. What would you like to start off with?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm quite a specialist just yet. I'm working on that, but we could
Compared
talk
to
about
us?
the process of evolution, because I think that is
So,
categorically misunderstood by both Hovind and his followers.
okay, go ahead.
So the way I usually describe the process to people. Oh, and by the way, if I cut out any time, just stop me and say, "Hey, Jackson, you're cutting out."
Sure, will do.
So the way I usually describe the process to people is consisting of essentially three parts, and that is mutation, then a mechanism of selection, and then speciation. I know there are other parts that could be talked about, but that's the way I generally try to describe it to people. In my talk with Hovind, we mostly covered mutations. Well, I say we covered it. We didn't really make any agreements on the topic, because his perception of mutations is that a frog mutates into a person, which is just utterly fallacious.
Yes.
I think I dealt with that in my video, or the response video I made, which has gotten like nearly 650 views or something. It's absurd how many it has now.
How many?
But
How many? Did you just cut out at the number?
oh, sorry, it has around 650 views last time I checked it, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, what they misunderstand about mutations, I think most of the time, is they think it's this, that each mutation is this huge leap in genetic material, as though a frog could give birth to a primate, which give birth to a human. Simpler than that, and we observe it on a daily basis. We just don't realize it because of the time scale that we live on. I believe Richard Dawkins addresses in The Ancestor's Tale. He
Mhm.
says the human mind is cowed with antiquity, and so we tend not to see these small changes in humans, which accumulate organisms that accumulate over time, creating the biodiversity that we have today and that we see throughout history or throughout the fossil record.
Yes,
And
and I wanna throw in something else, because the other thing he usually goes to is what most people at least understand under mutants. So growing an extra leg and
right,
growing double heads.
or,
Uh,
or like X-Men type
he doesn't.
powers.
Yes, he doesn't seem to be able to understand that there are beneficial mutations as well, and only focuses on those that are obviously bad.
Yeah, yeah.
So
The one of the I believe it's still one of the more popular theories on mutations is Kimura's neutral theory of mutation, which posits that the large
mhm,
majority of mutations are neutral. That is, they don't really have any beneficial or negative effects on organisms. And as we know from genetic studies, every human has approximately 127 or so mutations in 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 them when they become a zygote. So so there aren't just a few mutants here and there in the world. Everyone is a mutant. We all have mutations in our genetic code, which causes the genetic diversity among us. And a lot of those mutations are neutral. Might be slightly lighter or darker hair color or skin color or longer hair, shorter hair, something like that. Something minuscule, but and then of course there are the harmful mutations, which creationists always focus on because that's pretty much all they see when they talk about mutations. They say, "Oh, this person has, you know, there's a hypertrichosis or something like that." You know, they just want to focus on the negatives. But the
yeah.
beneficial ones do also exist. But I couldn't get Hovind to agree to what a beneficial mutation was or is. I guess it really seemed like he was trying to avoid calling anything a beneficial mutation because if he allowed himself to acknowledge that this organism had a beneficial mutation, then that would go a long way towards getting divinity out of biology in his mind, I think.
Mhm.
And
Well,
so,
there are two things that I'm aware of. Um,
mhm.
um, what we might call beneficial. I think there's a family. I thought it was in Italy, who has
Yes.
a different bone density.
Oh,
Is
that's it's there's a
or
family in Italy that has a mutation for the amount of cholesterol that they could intake. It's called
I'm
apolipoprotein A1 Milan,
yes. I think
and
I'm mixing up a few here.
the
I
other one
think
is from a family in Southwest America, which has the greater bone density,
yes,
mutation. There
yes,
are others, of
and
course. Yeah.
yes. I've also heard a couple of women in somewhere in Africa who have developed a resistance to AIDS. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Uh, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yes.
There was a mutation. One of the go-to argument that uh, creationists think demonstrates beneficial mutations is the malaria resistance in sickle cell anemia. But there
Yes.
is actually a better mutation that causes was HBC, I think, which is a hemoglobin problem of some sort. And the very worst that it causes is very, very mild anemia. That's the absolute worst it causes. So it both gives malaria resistance and has very low side effects. I don't remember what the name of the mutation is, but it's much better than sickle cell anemia.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
there's also tetrachromatic vision in some people, I think. I don't know exactly who, but I've heard of it. Uh, so
yeah, I think if we're going to look for it, we could find a lot of beneficial mutations. Um, but here's the thing. What I have found is that if you are talking to people, what we do at least, talk to people on Twitter or maybe here on YouTube, they're not a lot of sources where you can go to where it is actually explained to people that are not in the field. And I think that we could use some kind of um, um, maybe a website or something where things are explained so people can at least understand.
I totally
Or
agree with you.
I know there are a few people that are trying, and there's one thing I agree with Hovind on, because Hovind always says what I do has to be uh, easily understood by a fourth grader or an eighth grader. I'm not sure which grade he uses.
Yeah,
And I think that's where the crux of the matter is, because most of his followers don't have that much of an education. So I think that if you want to reach those people, what you need to do is make it simple and make it understandable. And I think that's uh, where it's still lacking.
yeah,
There's no source you can point those people to where they can um, read up on it in a way they can actually understand.
yeah. I think Aaron Ra in his one of his foundational falsehoods of creationism uh, explains uh, beneficial mutations, but of course, the creationists aren't going to go to listen to Aaron Ra talk about evolution. You know, they're not going to go all the way across to hear what the evolutionists have to say about the subject. They want to hear it from from the creationists, who unfortunately always consistently misrepresent the process in its entirety. They
Hmm.
they talk about uh and that's one of the major parts of talking to them about mutations, is they always say a beneficial mutation would cause an increase in genetic information, which they never define. And I pointed out in my um I think it was in the it might have been in both. I think I pointed out that information was a bad word to use to describe what DNA has, because DNA has both things that genes that work and pseudo genes that don't work. It also has endogenous retroviruses that are the remains of viruses that infected our ancestors, which don't code for anything. And so when they say information, you have to ask, well, does that, what I usually think that means is protein coding genes, because, what would be the point in mutating genes that don't do anything, right? So I tried to get them to agree to that, but of course he wouldn't agree to that. He would say, "Oh, well, information means information. You can't get any more clearer than that." Which which is patently false.
Yeah, and there's my second problem. Creationists point to DNA as being information, and
Yes,
I think it's it's not that simple, because I don't think uh, it is information in the way we understand what information is. It's a series of chemical reactions that have uh, a certain outcome.
exactly. Yeah, I've talked to creationists quite a bit at LSU because they come and they protest or what have you at the central building on campus, which we call Free Speech Alley. And so I have to explain to them that when they are uh, when they're developing, that every part of their development is a series of biochemical reactions. None of it is uh, like a computer. None of it. It's chemicals reacting to produce more chemicals to, that which influence these other chemicals elsewhere. You look at the DNA, and the DNA is read by um, with RNA polymerase, which generates messenger RNA. I'm getting this correctly. Trying to recall it from a few a few years ago. Um, and then the mRNA leaves the nucleus and goes to uh, the tRNA, which reads it and creates amino acid chains, which become proteins, and these proteins go off and they do some function somewhere. And so, they don't get that. And if they do understand how it works, then they turn it around and say, oh, well, that's just proof of intelligent design, which is another totally different problem.
Yes. Um, well, I'll at least see and try to come up with something where we could explain things like this in the most easy way possible. I'm not sure how exactly. Maybe in a video, maybe on a web page. So uh, I think I'll be calling on you for help to do that in future. Um, there's another thing I wanted to touch on, because I spoke about that with Tony at Hack and Slash 1,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what exactly life is. And Tony said um, it's not a real thing. It's a behavior. It's a behavior of chemistry, and that's what we call life. Would you agree with
Precisely.
that?
Yes, I 100% agree. Actually, in the second video, in the rebuttal to Hovind's rebuttal that I wrote, or whatever you call it, made it, um, on a picture, I talk about he makes a claim that life came from rocks essentially, and I'm explaining that it never came from rocks because rocks are not macromolecules. Life came from ultimately macromolecules, and I included a little sentence that says life is a behavior, which is totally what it is. We classify life on Earth, which is nothing to say of potential life out there in the universe, based on a set of criteria, which is that it needs uh, or it metabolizes food and water. It needs space. It interacts with the environment, etc. It evolves and other things, reproduces. Um, but and so many organisms, or they're organisms because they fit this set of criteria. But there are also things that only partially fit this criteria, like viruses and prions. And so there's a debate, I believe, in the scientific community, or at least there was. I'm not really up on my microbiology, but there was a debate that perhaps viruses are either a transition between life and what we wouldn't consider life, or they could just be protein shells that manage to capture DNA or RNA, and so they reproduce that way. So they only meet only part of the criteria for life for a long time, up into the probably 1800s, I'd say. I mean, the founding fathers of America believed in this idea of vitalism, which was that there was a force or an object or chemical or something within all life that made it living, perhaps an amino acid or something. We look at life now, we realize, well, that's not true, because things like alanine and leucine and other amino acids, we can find those in space, in nebula, and we found them on the Murchison meteorite, which was found in Australia, which contained a lot of amino acids and other chemicals necessary for life. And so we recognize today that life isn't a thing. It's not just carbon. It's not just carbon and hydrogen. It's not just amino acids. It's a behavior. It's chemicals. I know this sounds very reductive, but it's chemicals meeting a set of criteria, and so we call that life. So yes, I would totally agree with Tony on that point.
Yes, because the main thing I got from this is that it's not some kind of a force that makes things alive.
Right.
And if that's how you understand it, it is a lot easier, at least to grasp that it is possible from non-living material to become what we call alive, because it's nothing more than a chemical reaction.
Yeah, but
And
if you explain that to people, they're gonna, or if you explain that to religious people, they're gonna say, "Oh, that means life has no meaning. We should all just commit suicide, whatever." It's completely absurd.
yes, and that's another big problem, I think, that you have with religion, because um, why would life need a meaning? At least in the way I see it, it wouldn't need a meaning. It just is. And we are the lucky ones, because we can we have the intelligence to talk about it. And I think that's what makes us special. And if you look at it, that it's all just chemical reactions, then we are incredibly lucky that we developed an intelligence where we can discuss it and where we can investigate it and find it out. So if there's any purpose to life, I'd say with what we have, the capabilities we have and the technology we have, there is a purpose to life, and that's to find out what reality is all about and how it works.
Yeah, I agree totally. I
So
I think yeah.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna say, yeah, it's it's very unlikely that creationists understand the core principles of not just evolution, which I mean they demonstrably don't, but of of biology as a whole. They don't understand these concepts that I think biologists take for granted simply because they were, taught, and they do all the research and they realize, oh, okay, well, this is just how nature works. But average, but lay lay people, creationists in particular, don't understand. They don't understand homeostasis. They don't understand, uh, like we were talking about, that life is a behavior. They don't understand that everything our body does is chemical reactions, that are, and they really don't like that our intelligence is a product of chemicals. I get often from the apologists who think they're so smart that, oh, we can't trust our own minds if we just came from the slime, or some other generally humorous rhyme. They always put a rhyme on it. I don't know why. It's just kind of funny though. Uh, but it's they just don't understand it, and you have to breach these core concepts first, I think, before we can even begin to talk about evolution. And so Kent Hovind teaches his followers essentially, no, don't worry about these other parts of biology. Don't worry about the basics, the fundamentals. Focus on the the lineages of life without regard for how evolution works and how life is sustained. And it's terrible. It's why they don't understand anything about it.
Yeah, and what I find at least a bit comical is that Hovind always his go-to argument is, you believe we came from a rock.
Yeah.
When you look at the Bible, from dirt, where did dirt come from? uh, he believes exactly the same, and he thinks that the way we believe it is ridiculous. um, I still can't see the difference. If we came from dirt, and that's basically where we came from. So the only difference is there was never a God who made uh, a human being and breathed life into it. But basically, we came from the dirt, just in a different way.
Yeah, the more liberal Christians, I think, try to justify the what is it, the inerrancy of the Bible. Well, they probably don't believe in its inerrancy if they're more liberal. I guess they tried to rationalize the creation account with what we know about evolution, and they say, aha, um, the coming from dirt is just a metaphor for abiogenesis, which I think, not really. Um, Especially since these other animals and plants and planets and whatnot all came into existence, you know, before. I mean, yeah, planets and stars came into existence before humans and whatnot. But it says that all animals and all plants came into existence before humans were made from the dirt, which is false. There's no really way to rationalize that story to make it fit in with the evolutionary account.
No. And yeah, then when we get there, I think we should touch on the kinds, because
Oh, I love that topic. My
yes,
favorite.
you had a discussion with him about it. I had a discussion with him about with Kent Hovind about it. uh, I think Crocodile touched on that part too, and the guy a day earlier, Nolan,
Hmm.
touched on that. uh, there's yet a creationist to come forward with what a kind is. And I'm aware of a few articles that Answers in Genesis has on their website, and I think it was the article about camels and llamas, but I'm not quite sure. I'll try to figure it out, and if I have, I'll put the links in the description here, because where Answers in Genesis gets it catastrophically wrong, because in one article they explained there was one camel kind on the ark. In the other article, they say that different, that there might be more than one camel kind on the ark. At least both articles contradict each other. That's what I know.
Yeah,
And um, but they always come up with there's no good definition for species.
Yeah.
It is fluent. I know that it's not 100% accurate
There's
all the time.
there's a reason for that. There's actually there's a good evolutionary reason why species are so hard to classify, and I guess this kind of gets us back to the process of evolution, because after you have mutations, those mutations have to be, well, they can be selected by the environment. You can go through natural or sexual, or if humans are involved, artificial selection. There's also genetic drift and gene flow, which are all different mechanisms of evolution. But genetic drift is more random in air quotes than natural selection. Natural selection is not random. Um, but
Mhm.
but when you have these organisms that are being exposed to, let's just say, natural selection, um, then if they're living in a different environment, if they somehow migrate and become separated from the parent environment or parent population, and there's this new population, then if they're small enough, the founder effect might happen, which is where the small set of alleles that was transported with the organisms might become more prevalent in the population if they weren't already. Um, and so this population can change in their allele frequencies rather quickly because of their small size. Um, and so what happens then might be speciation, which in the case of geographic separation, would be called allopatric speciation. There are several different types of speciation. Allopatric is the most popular, it's the one most talked about because of it's just a population moving to a new place and then the population speciate, which is a cladogenesis. Um, and speciation, I think, is quite a problem for creationists, even though Answers in Genesis heartily embraces the concept, which creationists didn't years ago, but now they do. So hey, at least they're learning, right? But the problem is it falsifies uh, the notion of kinds in and of itself. Because if you can show that a new group, a new population, or a different population of animals can develop new traits or new structures, as we have seen over and over and over again, both in the lab and in nature, then there's no need for um, uh,
Either you're breaking up or the sound is gone now. Are you still there? Jackson, you might want to try pressing F5 and refreshing the page. That could help.
you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, awesome. Sorry about that. It was really weird. I don't know why that happens. But you can hear me again?
The sound is good now.
Okay. Sorry about that. Where'd I cut out?
You were talking about speciation and how we have seen that happen in nature and in the lab.
Right. So, we've seen it so many times that we recognize, or at least biologists recognize, that there's no reason to invoke divinity in biology because we can see new structures, new traits, new functions arise in nature without any assistance, I guess. One example is the Podmakaru lizards, which haven't yet speciated to, was it Podarcus sicula, I believe, or the Italian wall lizards. And so a small population of them was transferred from the island Podcopiste to the island Podmakaru, and the new population on Podmakaru developed herbivory, essentially, where the old population was mostly insectivorous, or very predominantly insectivorous, And so the new population became very predominantly herbivorous. And they also developed a cecal valve in their gut, which allows them to digest cellulose. And because of their new herbivorous nature, the population is much more dense because they're not fighting for territory, at least not as much as the original population was, since they're all eating plants. And so that's just one example. The cichlids. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was listening.
Okay. The cichlids in Africa, in Lake Victoria, Lake Malawi, and Lake Tanganyika, are another wonderful example. They speciate very rapidly, because they stick primarily to shallow areas of the water, to the sandbars, and so they're more or less allopatrically speciating in these large bodies of water, and so they they get separated for one reason or another. They try to stick to the sandbars, and they become new species. And if you read stuff on the cichlids in the lakes, you see that they speciate very rapidly, and the colors in the cichlids has also uh, become extremely diverse. So it's very amazing.
Okay.
Um,
Now I know that the cichlids are one of your favorite animals. I think we just found out why. Is that correct?
they are really amazing. I unfortunately only have one cichlid. He's a blue ram cichlid, Microgeophagus ramirezi. He's from Central America, I think, Central or South America. But he's the only one I have.
Okay. So you're not having your own speciation project going on at home, because that won't work with one.
Not quite yet. I don't really have the money to start up a a large breeding service.
Okay. Um, then there's maybe I'm jumping around a bit, but there's another
No, go
thing
ahead.
I wanted to address,
Mm-hmm.
and that has to do with the speciation, because uh, there have been uh, a lot of experiments uh, show speciation, and one of the most prevalent and at least what people are aware of is with fruit flies. And then you
Yes.
always get the argument, yes, but it's still a fruit fly, which
It's
is
maddening.
which is exactly what uh, evolution predicts, because it's not going to be something else. I tried to explain this to Hovind, and I had a very poor analogy uh, for that. Um, the way I try to explain it is, see it as as if the last name of the father is continued uh, in a population. If the last name of the father would stay the same, you wouldn't get offspring with a different name. That's a bit how evolution works. So if you start with a fruit fly, all its descendants will still be a fruit fly. If they evolve into a different species, that species will still be in the family of fruit flies. It will never leave the family. A correct way of saying how it works?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think to an extent that's a pretty good way of describing it. And really, this is another one of those core issues that creationists don't understand in biology, and yet want to make all these arguments against evolution. This is called what I think is known as the Law of Monophyly, which is that all your ancestors are still going to be in the same grouping as you. We are still, even though we don't have fins anymore, we don't have scales, we are still, cladistically speaking, fish, because our ancestors were fish, and we have all these wonderful transitions from protochordates, I guess, into, or no, not protochordates to things like haikuichthyes and haikuella, and we have Picaya and all these other great fossils. Which actually reminds me, you and Tony talked about some Cambrian species in your talk. You mentioned hallucigenia.
Yes.
Yeah, it's hallucigenia is a lobopodian. It's called a walking worm, I guess, is one way to describe it. It's one of the ancestors, I believe, of velvet worms, which is a onychophora. And the ancestors of velvet worms look very similar to the ancestors of arthropods, like Diania, and so that's one reason that scientists think both are very closely related to each other. But anyways, back to the chordates. So yes, we are still fish, cladistically speaking, because our ancestors were fish. And going up to the tetrapods, the evolution Romer's gap, as it used to be called, from sarcopterygian fish to amphibians. You had things like Eusthenopteron, Ichthyes, and Tiktaalik. Guys like them evolving into guys like Acanthostega, Tularpaton, and Ichthyostega eventually. And so you can see that we did evolve from fish. And so we are still fish. We're also still amphibians, and we're still reptiles, because it's not just that we share common ancestors with these guys. Our ancestors were at one point reptiles. You have the mammal-like reptiles. Most of them were called therapsids. The earlier ones were called pelycosaurs, and the earlier ones were much more reptilian. And of course, you had early amphibious tetrapods, and then we also evolved from fish. So in a cladistic sense, we are still reptiles, amphibians, and fish, even though we no longer possess some of the diagnostic characteristics of these groups.
Yes. So, and I'm a little bit bent on making it visible for people who don't grasp the concept, because another argument is, have you ever seen a dog give birth to a non-dog? That's
Yeah.
by both Kent Hovind and a lot by AIG, all the people working for AIG. And come up with is, it's not that way. If I go to something straight from the Bible, which is the rainbow, if we take a small part from that rainbow, say the part with blue and green in it,
Mm-hmm.
at what point does blue stop and green start?
Right.
And that's how you should see evolution going from one species to another, because there is no set boundary. And the way you can make that visible, in a quite easy way, I think, is with colors. If you have two colors, where one color goes into the next color, there is no set part where it stops being blue and it starts being green. And that's how we should see evolution, because it doesn't stop at a species and start with a new one. There's time involved, and over time you can see a different species. And that's, I think that's where you're going to give it a new name, because it's the difference now is so significant that you would need a different name. Is that correct? Is that how it is done in biology?
Yeah, the process of speciation is so well understood, that, oh, by the way, speciation is a form of macroevolution. Just tossing it out there. But the process is so well understood that there is what's called a gray zone in speciation, where two populations are something like between 0.5% and 2% dissimilar in their genome, and somewhere in that area they become classified as different species. Um, uh, but yeah, I guess this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The problem with the species concept is that there are a lot of different species concepts, and they do different things. For example, the most popular one that people refer to when they're looking at species is the biological species concept, but this concept only applies to sexually reproducing organisms, and really only up to a point. Kind of an arbitrary one, because it says if these organisms can produce if these organisms can't produce fertile offspring, then they are two different species. Except that uh, for some organisms, sometimes you can mate two that are of different species and get fertile offspring, which is how you get hybrids, and then they can go off on their own. It happens a lot in cichlids. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but you can go look them up. They're out there. Hybrids definitely exist.
Well, that's
Was it?
that's where Kent Hovind always comes up with his zebra zonkies.
Yeah, there's a sunflower. I believe it's a Helianthus anomalus, which is a hybrid of H. anus and H. petiolaris, which are two other sunflowers, which is now its own species. Um, it's a hybrid, but it's its own species, and so it's just it just the problem with species is they exist. It is a word we can use fairly effectively, I think. For example, we can apply the biological species concept to fossils. We just can't do it because you can't get two dead dinosaurs to mate, but we can examine their fossils and draw, I think, statistical likelihoods or something like that these two are different species. Uh, with Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus, for a long time, well, originally they were thought to be the two different species, and then it was thought for a long time that they were the same species, and then recently a new study was done where the Apatosaurus / Brontosaurus skeletons were evaluated, and it turned out, okay, well, maybe they are in fact two different species. They have enough dissimilarities to warrant being different species, and there are a lot of, and while on the topic of the anatomical species concept, there are a lot of fossils are reevaluated, and for some it turns out they might not be different species but the same species. There's a pachycephalosaur called Prenocephal, which is from the same locality and time period as the larger pachycephalosaur, for which the group is named Pachycephalosaurus. And Prenocephal, it turns out, might just be a young Pachycephalosaurus, but for a while they've been regarded as different species. They might just happen to be the same species because they're always found near each other.
Yes, and I think that's the most difficult fields to study, because am I correct that the only thing we have to go by is the skeleton? We don't have the ability to get DNA to distinctly verify if they are the same species, yes or no.
Yeah, you're correct. It's only within fairly recent species, I think, that have died within the past few thousand years or so that we can extract DNA from, because DNA degrades and then it's all gone, unfortunately, which is why Jurassic Park can't happen. But the yeah, I mean, you're right with in saying that, which is kind of unfortunate. I think it'd be really neat to bring back
Yeah.
some of these animals, and there's kind of a controversy over, actually, one of the National Geographic magazines I have over here is about, should we allow countries to bring back these extinct animals. I think woolly mammoths is probably the one that's most talked about, because Russia has even gone to the so far as to create a plasticine park that they're preparing for for the woolly mammoths whenever they bring them back, if they manage that. And I really don't know where I stand on that. I think it's an interesting field, but surely it has harmful side effects. You know.
What would be a harmful side effect if the let's say they would be able to bring back the woolly mammoth? What would you think would be a harmful side effect?
Well, for example, we don't know what, and this is just a hypothetical, of course, but we don't know what sort of impact giant elephants would have on the modern environment. Um, I think there was an episode of the show Person of Interest where there was a scientist who was trying to bring back the saber-toothed tiger, saber-toothed cat, uh, but it would have very disruptive impact on the environment because it would become like a super predator in that environment or whatever. And so it might potentially destabilize whatever environment it is. Of course, I don't know that for certain, which is why I say I don't really have I don't really have a position on it. It might do that, it might not. Um, I don't really know. I think research should probably go into to discovering if it is possible to bring back these organisms. I think that'd be a very interesting line of research. So why not, eh?
Yes, I think that, let's say it's possible and you're able to contain these new animals in
Mhm.
in a certain area. I think that's where at least the biggest problem about the impact they would have
Yeah,
would be uh, put down to a minimum at least, because then you have
yeah, that's the
just a
case.
certain area where they are. Um,
Hmm.
that shouldn't be that big a problem, I think.
If we can
And
manage that, then sure.
yeah, so I'm all for it, because um, I think I think we could learn new things again by having uh, a species we haven't been able to study at all. So, and that's where I think the line is, can we learn anything about it? Sure, it's cool to see an animal that was extinct brought back, but I think there's a lot more to learn, because um, the environment was so different when they were around. um, and I don't know if that's something that will that be retained. That's a question to you. uh, if we bring back animals, if we are able to get good DNA to bring them back, what's the contamination? The method we use to bring them back, is there any contamination?
What method would we use to bring back the environments they lived in?
No, let's say they wanted to bring back the woolly mammoth.
Okay.
How would they do it? They would need to get the DNA into existing material.
One way I think would probably be if it is possible to extract DNA from the bones, then you could what is it? You could put it in like a lentivirus, I think, maybe, and put that into a like a mother elephant, and she could perhaps reproduce, which might give us something closer to a mammoth, which is how we genetically modify crops and other animals. You take one way you do it is you take the desired genes and you put them in a virus, and then you could put them in some organism, and which is how we get the glowfish at the pet store, the zebrafish that can like glow in the dark. They're neon, yellow or pink,
Mm-hmm.
and so they do stuff like that. I don't know. I think that might be one way. They might not
Yes,
do
but
it that way.
if you want to recreate the woolly mammoth, the way you just described it, and I'm simply a layman here, so that's where my questions are coming from. What's the contamination with which you get from the modern animal you use to bring back the woolly mammoth? You said you put it in a virus. Can you explain that in a little bit more layman's terms? So the virus goes into the cells of the existing animal, but it doesn't take over all of the DNA. Am I correct?
Viruses use reverse transcriptase, which is it's an enzyme or protein, and then they can take their own DNA and imprint it on the host.
You're breaking up again. I think you might want to refresh. Now you're completely gone. Sound is gone. Can you press F5? Are you back? There's still no sound.
Hello?
Yes, you're back.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh boy.
I think that's still a glitch that YouTube has. I've seen more people having the same problem.
Can you
So we'll have to deal with it when it happens.
hear me?
I can hear you. You're still a bit dodgy.
Hello?
Can you talk for a while? See how the sound is? At the moment, there's no sound at all. Can you try and refresh? There's nothing. So I see you dropped off. We'll wait for Jackson to return. That shouldn't be too hard for him, as he still has the link, I guess. So I'll try and fill until Jackson returns. Wanted to try and have explained is what is going to happen if you put the DNA of an extinct species into an existing animal. As far as I'm aware, there will still be parts of the DNA of the existing animal which is transferred into the offspring, which should be the extinct animal. So though is how much of the extinct animal can we expect to get by doing this process? And Jackson has still not returned. I don't know what's going on. I'll see if I can contact him somewhere else. Hear me, Jackson? I'm on Twitter in the DM. See if you can contact me there, since I think we've lost all contact with you at the moment. I don't see you in the Hangout, so at least something happened. I'll try and message you. That's kind of a shame, because I think we had a quite interesting conversation going on. There are a few people in the chat. Maybe it's good to remind them that if they have a certain question, they can throw it out there in the chat. I see at least Renee and Tim and BJ in the chat. So if you guys have any questions, please throw them out. Should Jackson be able to get back, at least we can address some of the questions. For the moment, I'm not getting a response either here or on Twitter, which I think is kind of a shame, because we had a very good conversation. So I'm not sure what exactly happened. Could be that Jackson is having trouble with internet access. I have no clue, because normally he would at least respond. So we'll have to wait for a short moment. I should have had some sort of pause music, I guess, for things like this. BJ says maybe he's rebooted his computer. That could be. I think he's on a laptop, so could be he's doing that. I just got a message on Twitter. He's back. He's not back here, so I guess we'll have to wait just a little while to let him be able to get back in the Hangout. That shouldn't be a problem, because the link is still in Twitter. I'll see. So he's back on Twitter. He's not back in the Hangout yet. We'll see what happens. I'll at least, what I can do is make a new link and send him the new link and see what happens. I have no clue what happened, but I do know that some parts of the US don't have the internet access we have here in Europe, I guess. So we're quite fortunate.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
So,
I
oh,
can hear you. I can even
awesome.
see you.
Oh, sorry. There we go. All right.
Okay.
All right. I don't know what happened, but I guess my internet is terrible. So, which, can you
Yes,
still hear me?
I just explained. Yes, your sound is great at the moment. I just explained that internet isn't that great all over the US. I've heard that from several people. So
They are correct.
I
In
guess
some places,
I
it's
guess
terrible.
I guess I guess we're lucky back here because we have quite good internet with not that much uh, interference or drop-offs. So
There we go.
now we have to go back to where we were, and as a matter of fact, I don't have a clue where we were.
Uh, well, we were
Oh,
talking about,
about the DNA. What
yeah.
would remain in the DNA of let's call it the host animal? Um, I think there would be some sort of contamination. You wouldn't get a 100% woolly mammoth back because
Well,
the
well, yeah. I mean, we wouldn't get a 100% woolly mammoth because woolly mammoths were their own independent lineage, and so we'd probably have like a hairy African elephant or something like that, um, or perhaps Asian elephant. Um, but uh, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting topic and it's very interesting research, and so we should probably put more effort into it. So, but I was uh very interested in, or one of the things I'm very interested in is you mentioned earlier the concept of kinds.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we should I think we should address that. Would you like to do that?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. The thing I know that is they've started up a project, I think in the mid 80s somewhere, which is called baromenology. I don't know if you're aware of that, where they took up the task to define the kinds that were on the ark. Somehow that isn't going well because there's little to nothing. Uh, uh, we still don't have the kinds that were on the ark, so I think they might be struggling there.
Yeah, I mean the reason that what they're trying to do is always destined to fail is that the notion of kinds is anti biology, it's anti genetics. Because you look at dogs and cats, they say dogs and cats are two different kinds of animal. And so I think I asked Kent Hovind, would he consider a civet to be part of the cat kind? Or I think I said civet. They're also genets and
Yes.
linsangs and all these other um, cat-like carnivorans, feliforms that that aren't cats but have features of cats. Civets are actually um, they look a lot like the ancestors of cats and dogs. One of the most popularly known is Dormalicyon, which uh, is an ancestor or is thought to be an ancestor of both cats and dogs because it has features of both cats and dogs. And you look at animals on both sides of the divide, like hyenas, for example, on the cat side have dog-like features, and foxes on the dog side have cat-like features. And so, and they're both, or foxes are basal, I think, or sister to the rest of the dogs, and hyenas are basal to all the other cats. So it makes sense that we'd find features of both cats and dogs in them. And so it just finds is that you're right. It has no definition. Whitcomb and Morris wrote in their book, The Genesis Flood, that there were around 35,000 kinds of animals that were on the ark. But I read an Answers in Genesis article the other day by Marcus Ross, where he said there are only around 950 kinds of animal. I think Ken Hovind said in his debate with Bill Nye that there were only, was it 14,000 or was it 1,400?
Ken Ham, you mean?
Or sorry, yeah, it's Ken Ham. Sorry, Ken Ham said in his debate with Bill Nye, I think that there were either 14,000 or 1,400. I know there's a magnitude of difference, but I can't remember which one he said.
I'm not sure about the number there. I have to say, because I like to stay honest at least. I'm not sure about the number. What I do know is that the reply of Bill Nye was that we should see, I think it was 11 new species a day, if that ever happened, to get to where we are now.
Yes.
Which
Yeah.
I think is.
Go ahead.
Yeah, which isn't happening. We don't see that many species. I think we're still discovering species in parts that are tough to go to and where it's hard to do any research. But I don't think that we're discovering 11 new species a day in the areas where we live, which should happen there as well, and not only in the more distant parts of the world and least explored parts of the world. So, and when you look at what AIG puts out, they have their creation, which is basically two orchards, one that started in the Garden of Eden and then abruptly got destroyed in the flood, where only a few kinds survived and started a new orchard. I have yet to see anything from AIG which animals were in the first orchard and which animals were in the second orchard, and how he found that out. Because
yes, absolutely,
we all know that radiometric dating doesn't help. So because that's all fake, if you are to believe AIG. So how would they distinguish which was in the first and which was in the second orchard? Because there's no way to find out how old the animals are.
Yeah. They have no criteria for distinguishing one kind of animals from another kind, because anytime, if you just look at cats, for instance, and you say, okay, the characteristics that are diagnostic of cats are all of these, etc. Like claws and fur and lactal memories and whatnot. Well, carnivora as a whole also has many, many of those categories that are diagnostic to it. And then if you look at carnivora is a subset of Laurasia, which also has many of the characteristics that are ascribed to the cats. And Mammalia also has a lot of the characteristics ascribed to cats. And so, you can't just take the common denominator of traits and just say, okay, this is a kind. Because if you try doing that, then you can make kind larger or smaller, depending on which traits you consider to be simply diagnostic to the group. For example, most cats have retractable claws. Hyenas don't. which is why which is one of the dog-like characteristics they have. They don't have retractable claws. And so, even though retractable claws are diagnostic to the majority of cats, it's not diagnostic of all cats. So would hyenas be part of the cat kind, or would there be a separate hyena kind, I guess, for them? Same with the Kivets and Jeannettes and Linsangs and all those other guys. Would they be part of the cat kind since they are cat-like carnivorans? They have a lot of characteristics of cats. So would they also be part of the cat kind, or would they be a cat-like carnivore kind? It just
I
there,
think
there's
I
no
think if we have to see what kinds are, we I think the major source at the moment would be answers in Genesis. And when
yeah.
we look at answers in Genesis, they have their refurbished buses at the Ark encounter. And there's, I think you can still find it online, the poster for the opening of the Ark encounter shows 3 of the cat kind and 2 of the dog kind. So I think there were at least 3 cat kinds and 2 dog kinds, which
Of course.
which is another problem, because there, according to Answers in Genesis, there's only 1 dog kind, and yet there were 2 dog kinds on the Ark and there were 3 cat kinds on the Ark. So I don't know who's responsible for that poster and for the buses that have that poster printed on it on the outside. But I think they might want to rethink and redecorate at least the buses, because the buses contradict what they are saying, and that there were only 2 of the cat kind aboard the Ark.
Yeah, the creationists. I mean, in I guess to summarize what the problem is there's just no definition. They look at a lot of the morphological similarities of animals and they say, okay, well, we're just going to arbitrarily class all of these as one kind, and then whatever makes up a kind varies from one creationist to the next because none of them really knows what it means. Kent Hovind really kind of hammered on that in our conversation when he talked about. He said, "Oh, if a 5-year-old can pick it out and tell you
Yes.
what's part of a kind and which isn't, then that tells you." And I thought, okay, well, what if we put a gorilla, a chimpanzee, and a very hairy human all together with a banana, you know? So wouldn't
Yes.
humans in that case be considered a kind with the chimps and the gorilla?
Yes, and I think someone did that in some kind of video.
I think
I think,
Logic did, didn't he?
yeah, could be, but
I think that was
so
him.
many people, so many people have tried to debunk it. Um, I I'm for one, I'm glad that Hovind is taking on people now, because videos people make in a rebuttal to creationist claims, but it's still depending on two sides of a river, I think, shouting at each other,
Yeah.
and you don't have a conversation. I think having a conversation, and that's why I hate debates, because uh, and maybe I'm wrong, but to me, if you are going to do it in a debate setup, what you get is who gets in the best gish gallop and corners the other in a way that he can't uh, refute all the points that are made. I think a conversation is a lot better, because there you can stick on topic and at least address one topic at a time without giving someone else the opportunity to slip in more and more topics.
Yeah, I was not very
almost,
good at keeping him on topic.
well, I say he's very good of slipping in a lot of topics.
Yes, yes, he is.
It isn't. You have to remember, uh, these guys do this for a living, and
Yeah.
Hovind at one time, I think, spoke about 700 times a year.
Well,
He knows
my
he knows
goodness.
what he's yes, he knows what he's doing. Not only that, but he has his own repertoire.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he doesn't have to think. And that's where we are in the lesser position. If he comes up with stuff, we still have to think about how we're going to counter that. And countering it,
absolutely.
he already has his next uh, set of arguments ready because he has done this hundreds of times. So to be able to take that on is, at least for people like us, a lot more difficult
Yeah, yeah,
because we lack the experience. He did it so much that, we don't we will not be able to get that experience at it. What we can do is try and keep, um, people like that, but it's still hard because, the view of how reality works is so different that even if you stick to one topic, it for a creationist that already consists of maybe 10 arguments. So it's not that easy.
yeah. I agree. I agree with you with your point on debates in general. It's just who can be the loudest, who can say the most. It's not who can present the most factually correct arguments. It's just who can get more things in the time you have. And also, you're right, and you're also absolutely correct in saying that if I'm just going to talk to him about evolutionary biology, I just want to talk to him about mutations alone. He says, "Now hold on a minute. You've got to talk about how the universe came into existence, how elements
Yeah.
formed, how life formed," which is totally non sequitur, a complete non sequitur, red herring, gish galloping, and but it's like saying to someone who's trying to start a car and trying to like, oh no, you can't start the car, you can't work on the engine until you understand where all the metals that made up the engine were manufactured. You can't understand the engine until you understand how it was made completely in a factory, where the metals were mined, how they were formed. It's it's completely absurd. You don't have to know everything about the history of this engine to be able to make it work, to be able to
Yeah.
fix it, to work on it. But that's
Yeah.
but he makes it seem to his audience as though you have to know the complete history of this thing to view it, and it's I mean, and he won't
Yeah.
accept the definition of evolution. If you tell him evolution is just change in allele frequency in a population over time, he says, "Well, hold on a second. That's microevolution. You gotta that's not evolution. What you're talking about is macroevolution," which he also doesn't define because he doesn't want
Yes.
his audience to know it's a lot easier than you think it is.
But he has to stick to that because I don't know if he still has, the funds, but he had an outstanding offer of, I think it grew to $1 million or $500,000 for anyone who
Hmm.
could come up with evidence of evolution. And with that, he listed what that evidence would be. And that would be evidence for the origins of the universe. That would be evidence of stellar evolution. That would be, evidence of the origin of life, then microevolution and macroevolution. He has its 6 parts of evolution, which he still thinks is evolution, which is ridiculous because no one thinks of that as evolution. You can slip in the word evolution everywhere.
Yes.
He also has his analogy. Ford and Chevrolet both have the same bolts on the wheels, so they both evolved from a skateboard. No, they didn't. They evolved from a Daimler, and the Daimler is what we today know as the Mercedes-Benz. The first, at least it was acknowledged as being the first car, and the first Daimler evolved from a horse and carriage, and the horse and carriage evolved from, I think, the first wheel, and the first wheel could be evolved from a round stone where someone just noticed, hey, along quite easy, if I make that and make something, attach something to it, I can transport stuff. So you can put the word evolution everywhere, but it's not the same as the theory of evolution. And up until now, I still haven't found anyone, when he comes with his 6 stages of evolution, who said, we're not talking about evolution, we're talking about the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution has a distinct definition. And no one has ever told him yet. At least I haven't come up with any debate he had where someone told him that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you're talking about the quote, the air quotes, evidence for evolution, but it's evidence and evolution according to his definition. But he has no background in science, and so he's saying all these absurd.
He taught science for 15 years.
Didn't it turn out that was like completely bogus or whatever?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen clear evidence of that being bogus. So I like to stick to honesty. I can't say it is.
Okay, well,
maybe
maybe he did, but his degree, his quote doctorate, came from Patriot Bible University, which is an unaccredited trailer. I think it was out in the desert somewhere, as RNL called it. But seriously, no, his doctorate came from a diploma mill. Basically said, okay, pay $100.
Yes.
And probably write up your own quote doctor or thesis paper, and then
I have his dissertation, and I'm.
It's horrendous.
Yes, I'm still working on stuff, but I want to put it up on my website along with a picture of the university. It's no longer there, by the way. I don't know whether now, but the picture that floats around on the internet of that particular university, that trailer, at least that I know. I think they might have moved to a regular building or something. I don't know. I think the university as such still exists, because I think there's still an internet site of that university.
I can probably look it up, right? Patriot Bible University. Patriot Bible University, online Bible correspondence college. Let's see.
So they've moved.
I clicked on the website for it. I don't know if my internet's gonna let me look at the self. Wikipedia says it's an unaccredited diploma mill. And so, but yeah, it is not accredited. And oh, here we go. I opened it up and it says it shouldn't cost $40,000+ to earn a Bible degree, and at Patriot it doesn't. It is quick
Yeah.
and easy, starting at $99 for undergraduate degree programs. Holy crap! I wish my undergraduate degree program costed $99. That would have been
Well,
fantastic.
I'm still in the process of becoming a Christian minister. Um, someone tweeted a link to me from a church where you could become a minister online. No costs, nothing. So I like to try everything.
Mhm.
I'm also an ordained minister in Buddhism already. So I can marry
Yeah.
people in the US. I cannot marry people in Holland because Buddhism isn't recognized as being a legitimate church here.
Darn.
Same goes for the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. We don't get to make funny pictures for our driver's license as a member of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which you can, I think, in the US, because you're
Yeah.
entitled to having your religious headwear on your head in the picture.
Oh yeah, there was a whole debate a
But
few years back where people were arguing about, oh, they shouldn't be allowed to wear their was it spaghetti strainer on their heads because of
yeah,
it's like, oh, it's ridiculous, it's just a fake. It's like, you people have no reflective abilities.
no, but the church
But
I emailed, you had to give a reason why you wanted to become a minister, and I just gave the reason: I want to be able to marry people. And
mhm.
I have the problem living in Holland that I can't pick a state and a city in a state, or a postal code in a state in the US. So I didn't get ordained, but they're still sending me emails. I think every 2 or 3 days I get an email.
Uh-huh.
If I please want to consider becoming a minister, because they need more Christians, I guess. So I haven't taken that on. I will in future start up an email conversation to see how I can become a Christian minister in Holland, being an atheist, because I think that would be kind of hilarious to pull off.
Definitely. I found the Patriot Bible University Wikipedia page, and it says critics have charged that Patriot Bible University is a diploma mill as it has unreasonably low graduation requirements, lack of sufficient faculty or educational standards, and a suspicious tuition scheme, among other issues. The college itself has claimed that it simply does not choose, in quotes, to be accredited by standard associations. The school's current policies allow students with previous college credits to attain bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and even doctor of ministry degrees in months rather than years, for as little as $38 per month plus books. So it's ridiculous. I can't even.
Well,
No,
it's
I can't take it seriously.
I think that's something that is becoming more and more prevalent. Because it doesn't stop there. We're now at the point where um, um, I think the AIG and what was the other one? For creation science.
You talking about the
Oh,
Institute for Creation Research?
they're trying to set up some kind of peer review system.
Oh boy.
To validate their own research, because basically what peer review is, but peer means someone in the same field as you are, and if you can set up a peer review system with only creationists or intelligent design people, then you have a peer review system. And
well, it's not peer review, it's just back padding at that point.
Yeah, well, to the scientific community, it wouldn't make a difference, but to the
Absolutely.
people they are addressing, they can now say this is peer reviewed, and they're not lying. And I think that's dangerous, because that's going to affect education for at least the children that are homeschooled and now are presented with peer reviewed science.
Oh, it's already affecting homeschool students. You've got Jay Weil, who is a nuclear physicist, I think, or a nuclear chemist. And he writes, quote, textbooks on physics, biology, chemistry about young earth creationism that are for homeschool students. And it's just, it's horrendous. I read the first chapter of his biology book.
And it's getting worse because Ken Ham is with some other people starting a school.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
12 Stones. And just in the comments, I want to address Johnny Drive-By, Tim. He said Kent and Ken will never be convinced, no matter what the evidence is.
No, they won't.
Because Ken Ham said that in the debate with Bill Nye, and I agree, but I still think it's because that's where the money is. Getting money to do what they're doing, because people cling desperately to the Bible, and these are the people that are validating their beliefs. These are the people that are validating all the errors in the Bible. So, but I also agree. I don't know who said it. Someone said it a while back, that creationists are the ones that are going to bring down Christianity, because they are obviously clinging to things that are so ridiculous that people will drift away from Christianity. They're going to at least be the ones that cause amount of people to leave the Christian church.
Yes, I totally agree. One thing I guess I want to point out, I guess in that same vein, is that you're talking about creationism is where the money is. I agree, which is why I think which is why Georgia Purdom is so bizarre to me. She actually has a real credible PhD in genetics from an actual accredited university. And yet genetics is the most destructive subject to creationism and aids evolution the most. And so I can't take her seriously when she talks about creationist matters, because in the back of my mind I'm thinking, she can't possibly believe this. She, as someone who has done actual peer-reviewed experiments in the field, or I guess in the laboratory, she has to know that what she's saying is totally bogus. She can't possibly believe this, and it's so strange to me.
Yes, and there's another one, Jensen, I think is his name. He just did a couple of YouTube, Facebook Answers News, it's called, with Ken Ham. He has a legitimate PhD as well. I'm not sure in which field, because he said, let's call it biology, because otherwise people get confused.
Maybe it's like
Which,
biophysics or something.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
I think these people just are there for the money, I think, and for an easy way to earn it. Although in the case of Georgia Pertham, she might be that warped that she actually believes what she believes, and the reasons for it, I can only guess, but I do think that she actually believes the things she says, because if in an interview you can say, I have a child that's 3 years old or 4 years old at the time, and she's just a dirty sinner, it takes a lot of brainwashing to have a mother say that about her child, and I think that's disgusting. But
Oh yeah,
maybe
it's
that
terrible.
is just me. Listen, we're
One of
on I think 2 hours now.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yep.
Or coming up on 2 hours. I still wanted to address one thing, and that was what I asked you
Okay.
about. At least one lineage we have of an animal evolving into one of the modern animals. You had a couple of those you knew about. Is there one you want to address, where we have?
Well, one of the most popularly talked about lineages, as far as mammals go, among both creationists and the evolutionists, is the whales. Creationists love talking about the whales. When I talked about whale evolution with Nephilim Free, which was back in January or February, one of those, um, we talked about it a little bit. What creationists fail to understand about whale evolution is that it is so much better documented than they think. They think, oh, they just have legs becoming flippers and that's it. But that is far from the only thing that is evidence of whale evolution. There's also the head structure, the inner ear structure, which is unique to cetaceans. The evolution from teeth to baleen, because is the group of baleen whales. They actually have the genes for making teeth, but they have baleen instead. And you can see some whales in the fossil record, like a Chonocetus and Idiocetus, I think, that have both teeth and baleen. You can see the change in the hip structure, change in the spine structure, and all this other stuff. It's crazy. Can I put you on pause for just 1 second, please?
Okay. Yeah, but that's also one I know about, where we have quite a good lineage going from a land animal to a sea animal, and I think there have been a couple of documentaries. I'm still not sure where I can find them all, but on the whale, there's a documentary. There has been a documentary, I think, National Geographic, but I'm not sure, where they show the different animals we at least now know about, starting with the ancestor that started going into the sea for food only, and gradually moving there
Mm-hmm.
to at least live there. So we have the different fossils where we can, at least for the layman, can see how the nostrils move up on
That's
top
another
of
one,
the
yeah.
head and become a blowhole. So that's all documented, and that brings me to another thing,
Yes.
which is the fossil record, which I think is a thing we should at least touch on later a bit. But that's all
Yeah,
documented, and
absolutely. It's also documented embryonically, believe it or not. When whales are developing as embryos, the nostril, or sorry, the blowhole moves from the tip of the nose up to the top of the head. It moves during development. It's crazy. So it's like it's retracing the evolution of whales. But whales aren't the only ones who are documented, or among mammals who are documented moving back to the sea. There's also manatees. There are early land-dwelling manatees in I think it's Jamaica. Like a Prorostomus is the only one I can think of off the top of my head. But it's basically a manatee with legs, and we see now manatees with, or manatees have fingernails. So we know that at one point they were land dwelling. Maybe it was before the fall.
yes, I remember that one because you and Hovind talked about nails, and that's where I was sitting in front of the screen yelling manatees, manatees, because
Yeah, I didn't even think about it.
yes, well, you can't think of everything, and that's what's difficult
That's true.
in talking to a creationist. But yeah, I think what we need is more sources where people can go to, and where people can get their information. And I think what we are doing on Twitter and on YouTube still can make a difference. But the only problem is you need people to go to certain websites or certain videos to watch and to read. And I think that's where the biggest problem is, because every site you can link to, they're going to skip it because they don't have the education to even understand what they're reading about. At least
Yeah,
for the most people I've encountered on Twitter, that's the fact.
yeah. The what's interesting though is that creationists have backpedaled over a lot of their positions on things. Like first it was there are no beneficial mutations. Now some creationists like Answers in Genesis will admit to beneficial mutations. There's also natural selection doesn't happen. Of course it does. Speciation doesn't happen. Now they backpedaled over all those things. They say, yeah, mutations, natural selection, and speciation all happen, but it's all intelligently guided. And so it's like they're getting ever closer to pretty much outright saying that evolution happens. They're just
Well,
they're trying
there's
to
this
go.
famous video that Potholer 54 made about Kent Hovind, where he put up several video clips of Kent Hovind that basically state that he accepts evolution completely. He just the wording, and that's it.
He said it's Potholer what?
Potholer 54. I'll link it in the description later, and I'll send you a link on Twitter. I think the title was Potholer 54 and Kent Hovind come together. Not like that. He has his way of making videos, and every time he says we're coming together, you hear the music. I think it was from The Love Boat, the television series The Love Boat, And then he screams out, "Not like that." But that's basically a video where he shows that kept every piece of the theory of evolution. They just changed the wording in order to pretend that they don't accept it. And I think the best example we have at the moment is a guy who worked on the Is Genesis history movie, and I'll link that as well. And I have mirrored that page because if that gets a lot of publicity, Answers in Genesis will at least put pressure on him to remove it. And that's a blog of Todd Wood, where he basically says, listen, everything about the theory of evolution is correct.
Oh, yes. I've seen that. Yes. Paulogia showed it.
Yes. That's where I got it from too. So for what it's worth, huge credit to Paul, because he really does his research, and I strongly advise everyone to subscribe to Paulogia's channel, because his videos, in my opinion, are great, and he's addressing the right people, and he's doing it in a way where they can understand and maybe be triggered to do the same thing he did. But yeah, that's he addressed that, I think, quite nicely. There's nothing wrong with the theory of evolution, and the only reason I don't accept it is because I have to follow the Bible, and that's it. That was his only rebuttal. So
yeah, there was a geologist that Dawkins talked about in the God Delusion, I think. And this geologist came to the fork in the road where you either become honest or you become a creationist, as Arnar said.
yes,
and or you stay honest or stay creationist. And so he went through his Bible, ripping out the pages that didn't conform to what we know about geology today. And he said basically it was a whole bunch of pages. But then he thought, I have to stay with my religion, and so he did that, tossing out the geology, which is just tragic, just absolutely tragic.
yes. Well, I can read. I have the blog in front of me. I can read parts of it. Evolution is not a theory in crisis. It is not teetering on the verge of collapse. It has not failed as a scientific nation. There is evidence for evolution, gobs and gobs of it. It's not just speculation or a faith choice. And later on he says, I say these things not because I'm crazy or because I have converted to evolution. I say these things because they are true. Which I think is a devastating blow to the creation movement, having one of your poster boys having that on his blog, even though it's a blog he wrote in 2009, and I still don't know why that hasn't surfaced earlier. So huge credits to Paul from Paulogia and to expose it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's not just that there's evidence for evolution occurring in the past, it's that we can use our knowledge of an old Earth or old Earth geology and phylogenetics to make predictions that are confirmed as true. And again, for example, oil. We can't find oil without assuming that the Earth is billions of years old, which all geologists do. You can't find oil on the global flood hypothesis. In the same way, you can't make a medium rare pot roast in 30 seconds. it has to do with the amount of time that the rocks and are heated before you get like gas and oil. Two phylogenetic hypotheses that were spectacularly verified were Neil Shubin. You've heard of Neil Shubin, yeah?
No, no. To be
Oh,
honest, no.
he's a paleontologist who runs the Chicago Field Museum. He's the curator of it, and he predicted that on Ellesmere Island in Canada, in Arctic Canada, in this Devonian strata, he should find an ancestor of tetrapods. Surely enough, he went there, they dug around, they found Tiktaalik, which has characteristics of fish and
Yes.
tetrapods. And that's the one I think a lot of... Go ahead.
I knew the story. I didn't know the scientist who made the prediction. I did know that Tiktaalik was predicted by evolution, and evolution gave us the tools to narrow down the search to a specific region and to a specific where we should be able to find an ancestor, and that's where they found Tiktaalik.
Yeah, but the best part is that's not... Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the best part is that's not the only one. There are you know Microraptor?
Yes.
Okay, so Microraptor was discovered in 2003, I think. Its existence was predicted in either around 1900. Its existence was predicted over 100 years before it was discovered by a paleontologist, William Beebe.
I think you dropped off again.
We should find... Uh-oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. William Beebe, he said, okay, we have Archaeopteryx. We should expect to find a lineage of...
You're dropping off again.
Are asymmetrical... Uh-oh, can you hear me again?
Yes.
Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're back. A lineage of dinosaurs and
that have asymmetrical flat feathers on their front and back legs. I think he said they should be like equal length or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so he called it Tetrapteryx. And surely enough, over 100 years later, we found Microraptor, which meets that criteria. Microraptor's existence was predicted over 100 years prior to its discovery.
Yeah. Listen, we've been on now for I think for 2 hours. I think this is where we should end it. We didn't get to all the topics we wanted to get to.
Hey, there's always next time.
Yes, so I think we could do it. We could do it again, and at least for now we have a video people could listen to, and maybe have some of the questions answered. I'd like to thank you for coming on and sharing the things you know, because to lay people like us, at least you would I think deserve that name, because you've got a lot more to tell about the subject than we can, and at least you have the ability to make it knowledgeable for people that don't have the best of educations. I don't think is the people we need to address. We can help people on Twitter have a source, but that source still has to address the people we want to address, and not just those who already invested a lot of time in doing research and becoming aware of what we already know.
Great. Well, thank you for. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I said thanks for
Go
having
ahead.
me on.
Anytime. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. So we'll do it again next time.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay. Until then, see you, Jackson.
All right. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
You too. Bye bye.